and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And we're a little informal today. I am at least.
I'm
because
dripping in sweat. We walked 2 miles up here in 90-degree heat.
We're having a heat wave.
Please.
Okay. In the news this week, and the heat is really coming on us, Trump is getting ready to appoint a Supreme Court justice who will reverse Roe v. Wade and undo marriage equality.
And those are only the things we've thought of. There are a million
Many
more
things
coming down the pike. It's
well, we'll tell you a way out.
Well, you know, I wanted to get to this at some point in the show, but while it's on my mind, I've heard from a couple of viewers who have been surprised at my negative reactions to a couple of things lately, a movie, a TV show, whatever. I am in such a bad mood.
Sure.
The heat, getting older. But it's it's the loss of the country. It's the end of democracy.
We've been activists for years each, and we see it all
Give me a laugh.
dissolving.
I'm scared to death. I really am. I am.
As well we should be. This is fascism.
So I apologize.
mean, we're not exaggerating.
I apologize for my negative attitude recently. I will try to put things in perspective. But man, it's hard.
Gotta be serious.
It is hard. So moving on to other
good news
headlines. Well, yes, hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, marched nationwide to protest Trump's separation of asylum seekers from their children.
And while an anti-transgender referendum was scuttled in Montana, we've been telling you about the one in Massachusetts, and we have a report on that from the Human Rights Campaign about how they're fighting it with the people there.
We also have come across a report that trans activist Jazz Jennings has had her surgery. That is excellent news.
At 17. I went to the funeral and memorial for Dick Leitch this week, the gay pioneer, pre-Stonewall activist, where his remarkable achievements were celebrated.
Pro soccer player Collin Martin has come out. He plays for a U.S. team. He, believe it or not, he is the only man currently out in any major league sports team.
Women don't have this problem as much.
Not as much.
Not at all. Brendon Urie of Panic at the Disco has thrown major support to high school gay straight alliances, GSAs.
In Istanbul, activists defied a ban on having a pride march and got seriously attacked by the police for it.
And you think things are tough here? Well, we've always told you how tough they are in Africa, but there have been major breakthroughs for LGBT rights in eSwatini and Angola.
Well, these are always the stories that cheer me up from around the world. The activists who are not afraid to stand up and speak out and demand justice in these places around the world that, you know, I'm an ignorant American, but it seems to me that they're showing a lot of guts.
And we're going to talk about how terrible things are here, but, you know, when I was sitting in Dick Leitch's funeral, it was just a funeral mass at an Episcopal church. There were, you know, down times. I just thought, here's a guy who was out and proud in 1964 and way before Stonewall, when people wouldn't come out and we were criminal and everything else. And you know, we have to find ways when the law is against us, as it may very well may be again, to stand up to it. People should not, you know, they can reinstitute the sodomy laws. We're not going to stop making love. I posted about this on Facebook and got a hell of a response to it. You know, abortion is obviously a much more serious thing, but before abortion was legal, there were all these underground networks. It was harder. They tried to find safe abortion for women. These are the kinds of things that we have to do. We have to break bad laws in order to stand up to them.
Well, the New York Times actually had a very interesting front page article this week about the fact that in this day and age there are alternative methods of abortion that are much more accessible to women everywhere.
Pills,
yeah. And while I think that's not going to get rid of back alley abortions and people trying to self-abort in harmful ways.
People will die.
Definitely. There are alternatives, and if we're clever about advertising those, we can be helpful.
You know, I mean, they're cutting everybody's benefits. I mean, we will yell and scream about it, and we will try to throw them out of office, but we also have to learn to take care of each other when that happens. We have to find ways.
Well, what you said is a good reminder that we survived before, when all of us were illegal and everything we did was illegal, and there's no shutting the door on all of us who have come out in the last decades. And
I mean, the people who lived through, Berlin in the 20s might disagree because everything was shut down in a country like that.
And as I like to say, Hitler was elected.
Yeah. So, anyway.
And aren't we looking forward to those NATO meetings and the Putin meeting? You wonder why I'm upset.
My favorite word posting on Facebook in response to those things is grotesque. Well, I mean, in Ireland, I mean, I'm not jumping the gun here, but it relates to Trump.
We're digressing a little.
No, the U.S. Embassy has an annual 4th of July thing, right? Mm-hmm. We're taping the day before the 4th of July.
Yeah, we're taping a day early this week on Tuesday because our studios are closed on the 4th of July. So whatever happens in the next few days before you see this, we will catch up with next week.
The U.S. Embassy throws a big 4th of July party in Phoenix Park in Dublin, and government ministers and leaders of parties are all canceling this year because in direct response to the way we're treating children at the border, but there's so many other things to protest.
Allies, what we're...
Yes.
The list is endless. Let's get on with
what we're getting on to is the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that. I mean, basically every candidate is a solid far right winger that they're talking about. But let's look at some of the ones. You'll know by July 9th who he's going to pick. But this Brett Kavanaugh, this guy hindered immigrants in custody from getting an immigrant in custody from getting an abortion. He was directly involved in that case. Mm-hmm. And this Amy Coney Barrett, from the Seventh Circuit, she was a clerk for Scalia. She has written that Roe v. Wade was erroneous. And we could keep going down the list. They're all awful, all right?
They are all awful. William Pryor of Alabama, horrendous.
But the question is, are they going to get somebody sort of who hasn't made direct statements that are going to it? Well, there's two, it's hard to lose Susan Collins from Maine, but if it's explicit enough, she might. I'm not holding out much hope.
If they have Heidi Heitkamp and Joe Manchin and Joe Donnelly, they don't care about Susan Collins.
Well,
they just isolate her. They write her off. Now, if those 3 Democrats voted for Neil Gorsuch, who is an evil monster.
Yes. I'm not trying to get you to think ahead too much, but I do want to, and I don't want to offer false hope, but if we elect a fully Democratic Congress in 2020 and a Democratic president, they can change the number of people on the Supreme Court.
We're not going to get into FDR court packing territory, are we?
FDR did propose court packing because the New Deal was being undone by the Supreme Court, and a Democratic Congress said no to him. But at this point, given the treachery and the evil of the GOP when it comes to the court, not giving a hearing to Merrick Garland, etc., they are fully within their rights to expand the number of people on the court, and they can. I mean, it was done many times in the 19th century, and then they sort of settled on 9, and they stuck with that. But you don't have to. And they're playing hardball, and what are we doing? Somebody pointed out that no Republican Congress has confirmed a Democratic justice since 1895.
Yeah.
I mean, I was shocked at that, but it's true.
Yeah.
So, they're playing with guns. We brought a knife to the fight, so we have to change on that.
Well, I'm open to any discussion, but it makes me very, very nervous to open up discussions like that because they can do it to us in...
Yes, they can do it. We can end up with 100 people on the Supreme Court because the only thing the Constitution does says is that it's a life appointment. That's the only thing.
Well, we want 1,000 people in Congress, right? At least.
No, absolutely. This is the thing. We're all going to reflect. Read the Declaration of Independence this week, please. Read the Constitution. I mean, the sins of King George are very similar to the sins of Donald Trump. But we need a new system, and that's what the Declaration of Independence says. It uses the word system when it's this noxious, or they don't use that word, but you said it's time to change the system. A Senate that has 2 members for every state, that California gets 2 and North Dakota gets 2, is insanely undemocratic. It was founded by bad people who wanted to preserve slavery, and that's why they did it that way. We are different. We are better than that, but we can't just say, oh, we're going to hope for the next election's going to get better. We need a new system.
All right. When convening the committee to devise the new system, make sure that Mr. Andrew J. Humm is...
I'm ready.
Okay.
And Ken Sherrill, the gay political scientist, says in political science circles there is a ton of talk about this right now because we've got to. That's what we've, and that because we have a country where half the people are. I think both sides are unhappy now, and I think if we gave them their nation, they wouldn't elect somebody as stupid and evil as Donald Trump. I mean, they'd want somebody who could actually run the thing, their country, and maybe we need 2 countries or 3. Other places have done it. We're not immune from that. But what's the point of trying to make us get along when we're never going to get along?
Well, I don't think they're horrified enough by Donald Trump yet. I think they're quite happy about some of it.
They like how mad he makes us.
Yeah.
That's what they're most enjoying. They like how racist he is. But you can't eat racism. Eventually they're going to need some competence. All right, and you look at who he's appointing now to the lower courts.
Nice segue. Yes, let's move there.
Well, we have a picture of this guy in Alabama, Andrew Brasher, 37 years old. As they say, young, white, male extreme. The Solicitor General of Alabama. He urged the gutting of voting rights. He defended Arizona's law requiring proof of citizenship to vote. That was overturned 7-2 by the Supreme Court, by Scalia. He wrote an amicus against Obergefell. He's unwilling to. He's one of these guys that is unwilling to say that Brown v. Board of Education was rightly decided. That's the easiest question on the list. And he's anti-abortion. And
now he's going to be a federal judge in Alabama.
Maybe.
Meanwhile, our president is also nominating R. Clark Cooper, the former head of the Log Cabin Republicans, of course, the gay organization, as Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. He has extensive experience in the military, at the State Department.
But his White House biography does not mention that he was the head of the Log Cabin Club.
He also sued against Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We haven't quite figured out why he's desirable in this position. But
and we told you there was no Pride Month celebration at the Pentagon, and House Democrats wrote to Secretary James Mattis asking, what changed? Why are you backing away from your support? Because they actually did it last year in the Trump administration.
Oh, yeah, well, and ambassadors around the world, we'll get to this in international news, but U.S. ambassadors around the world are still standing up for Pride celebrations and LGBT people.
Until Tony Perkins finds out about it.
Yes, and starts knocking them off one by one. You know, of course, about the Trump administration and their horrendous treatment of potential asylum seekers and immigrants. Well, here's a new wrinkle. A trans woman, U.S. citizen, has had her passport renewal denied just for no reason, and she's been told that she was raised in foster care. She must dig up her foster care records to prove that she's a citizen, and she must produce proof of her transition to affirm her gender identity. Now, she's been living in her current gender identity for over 20 years. She's had a passport for decades. All she was trying to do was renew her passport, and now they are throwing this at her. And this is what they're doing to people across the board. They're just doing everything they can to shut people down, roll back the clock.
My roommate works for the United Nations. He was coming home from Iraq, where he's been working with refugees. He gets pulled off the plane in Frankfurt on the way home by the Americans, and they say, "We think you're like one of these guys who shut up Fort Hood." This is what they say to him. Looking at the country, he said,
I know, Doug, this is not who he is.
"I work for the United Nations. I have a UN diplomatic passport. Are you for real?" I mean, you have to be careful with these people because they have an awful lot of power to stop you. That's what happens.
They are just trying to screw everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody.
You would think that would peel some people away. And they're revoking Obama-era guidelines that encourage the consideration of race in college admissions processing as a way of promoting diversity.
Of course they are. Now let's talk about fighting back. Let's talk about the Families Belong Together rallies.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, this was nationwide. It was called for June 30th, and all across the country, people, and in New York, there were tens of thousands of people. Let's put up one of the pictures there. There was a there was LGBT justice for justice for LGBTQ immigrants. That was certainly part of it. Another picture showed, what else have you got there? Yeah, I saw these guys, a gay couple standing up for Roxana, the transgender woman who was died. She had AIDS.
In ICE custody.
In ICE. And then what else do we have for a picture there? Oh, Jerry Nadler was there. So Jerry Nadler is our congressman, and he will be the head of the House Judiciary Committee if you elect a Democratic majority in November. He will be the head of that committee. And he said it's as much of a crisis as we've had since the Civil War. I said, Jerry, Civil War didn't end. And that's what the problem is here. And, I went along with some of this conversation with him and, said, well, what about secession? What about breaking? Oh, no, we don't want to leave anybody behind. Okay, keep everybody together, but it's
We'll let them into our country.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. We're very nice. We're very nice.
Well, it is.
But it was so nice to be out in these throngs of good people, the same kind of people who were at the women's marches and everything, and are ready to march when he fires Mueller.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, then let's. Good news from Montana.
Yeah.
They had an anti-trans ballot measure proposed, and the right wing was trying to gather signatures for this, and we succeeded in delaying this for a while by making them rewrite it. The court had decided it was not honest in the way it portrayed itself. But they went back and they rewrote it and they tried again. Well, they have failed to collect enough signatures to put this measure on the ballot.
This would have barred people, transgender people, from using public facilities in their gender identity, corresponding with their gender identity. But in Massachusetts, as we've told you, they have a referendum there. Now, Massachusetts, the legislature is great. They just passed a bill against conversion therapy in the House. But the Human Rights Campaign, who was working with the people on the ground in Massachusetts there, put together, with their transgender spokesperson there, a video on what's going on in Massachusetts.
I'm Sarah McBride, the Human Rights Campaign's National Press Secretary. I'm in Boston on behalf of HRC for the launch of a campaign to defend transgender equality here in Massachusetts. In 2016, Massachusetts passed a law protecting transgender people from discrimination in public spaces. Unfortunately, recently, anti-equality activists collected the minimum number of signatures necessary to add those protections to the ballot in 2018.
A group of Massachusetts residents are pushing to repeal the state's transgender non-discrimination law.
This is a critical race for the transgender community, for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and for the LGBTQ community across the nation. The eyes of the country will truly be on Massachusetts come this November, as Massachusetts is now the first state to have transgender equality on the ballot. HRC is part of the executive committee of the campaign that was launched, a coalition of people across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, from business leaders to faith leaders to transgender people who are fighting to make sure that everyone in this Commonwealth knows that they are welcomed, that they are loved, and that they are protected from discrimination. The stakes could not be higher. If anti-equality activists win here in Massachusetts, they're going to take this plan, they're going to take these strategies to states across this country to try to roll back the clock on our progress. Too many people think that this law won't be repealed in Massachusetts simply because it's a deep blue state that's voted Democratic. But we cannot be complacent in the face of these attacks. We saw in California with Proposition 8.
Voters in California approved Proposition 8, a ban on gay marriage. It was a stunning defeat for gays and lesbians.
It restored the second-class citizenship of same-sex couples and gay people in that state.
Even in some of the most supportive states, sometimes opponents of equality can win. So we need your help to fight back against these attacks. We need you to volunteer, we need you to donate, we need you to speak out so that everyone in Massachusetts knows that they should vote yes to defend trans equality in this Commonwealth.
What a disgrace that human rights are being put to a popular vote. They don't allow that in the District of Columbia.
Well, you'd think that Massachusetts would be fairly safe, but of course it's not.
It's not that hard to get something on the ballot in Massachusetts. We only very narrowly averted a referendum on the marriage thing. It came, you know.
Yes.
They only needed like a quarter of the legislature to go along with it.
We had to manipulate that a little. So heads up in Massachusetts on this attempt to repeal non-discrimination protections. And congratulations to young Jazz Jennings, 17 years old. I Am Jazz, very popular reality show on TV. She's been a great activist for many years. And I've watched the show, and I think it's a terrific look into her life and her family's life. They've been very generous about sharing their story for years.
She did say in her post about this, I have been looking forward to this my entire life. I've been ready for this my entire life. That she said she's going to miss peeing standing up. She said that.
Well, maybe she can still accomplish that.
She said when it's...
Anyway, did we show the picture of her in her hospital gown?
Jazz Jennings.
Jazz Jennings. She's had her confirmation surgery. There she is, looking very happy.
That's
and
great.
you know, one of the big issues on the show this year was the doctors told her, you have to lose weight to have this surgery. You are too large.
Really?
And I don't know if it was about, you know, blood pressure or self-image, or but that was the big issue, and that picture
really
makes it look like she really has lost a fair amount of weight.
You want to talk about some other political things?
Well, let me.
go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, in Missouri, Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill's opponent is Josh Hawley, a law professor at the University of Missouri, who worked on a fellowship at the virulently anti-LGBT Alliance Defending Freedom that wants the sterilization of transgender people and praises sodomy laws. He has referred to LGBT people as sexually confused and sinful, and he wants to be your senator. Just say no.
I have a few follow-up notes from last week's primaries. Jared Polis won the nomination for a Democratic nomination for governor in Colorado and is considered the heavy front-runner.
Out gay congressman.
But he did not win the nomination at the state Democratic convention. No. He lost it, in fact, 2-1. And he says it's because the Democratic convention there was scared of him as a gay man being the nominee. In Maryland, Chelsea Manning, we had told you some months ago, was running against the popular Democratic incumbent Senator Ben Cardin in the primary there. Chelsea got 5% of the vote, which actually I think is not a bad showing against the Democratic establishment in Maryland. And finally, in New York, Cynthia Nixon has been started to pick up some political endorsements in her run for governor against the incumbent Andrew Cuomo. Melissa Mark Viverito, the former city council speaker.
Yes, and she got Roberta Kaplan, who argued the Windsor case at the Supreme Court.
And Jimmy Van Bramer, who is a leader of
and is breaking away from the machine in Queens now that Joe Crowley is down.
So some momentum developing in that race.
And in New York, Carolyn Maloney, longtime congresswoman from the east side of Manhattan, narrowly survived a primary challenge from Suraj Patel, whose campaign used fake profiles on dating apps like Grindr to lure people to his side.
politics. Isn't it fun?
And in Dixon, California, the Vice Mayor, Ted Hickman, declared Straight Pride American Month, called us fairies, misspelled it, and Tinkerbells. Charming.
Update on the story from last week about Pride in North Carolina. I was a little confused. Let me straighten it out.
Yeah.
Raleigh and Durham have had Pride festivals, Pride marches for many years in North Carolina, but Wake County, in which Raleigh sits, the commissioners, for the first time, recognized Pride Month. So that was what was
the news. That was the news. All right, bad news in Boston, where a gay homeless man was locked up by a kid named Jackson Sugru, 19 years old. Shagru, in a church bathroom for days and beat him, and now is trying to use a homosexual panic defense.
You locked him up for 4 days.
And you beat him. No food and water.
And then you're saying you were scared of him?
Yeah.
He finally escaped and went to the cops, and they arrested this guy. In Cleveland, trans woman Keisha Wells, 58 years old, was shot dead. This is the 14th murder of a trans woman this year.
That's terrible.
And activists in Fort Lauderdale are really getting angry and getting out in the streets to demand that the cops start looking for the killers of 3 trans women in Fort Lauderdale.
They did arrest...
but that was a domestic violence thing. And the woman who was shot, the trans woman, is alive and is identifying her attacker.
And you did Cleveland, yes?
Yeah, I just did
Yes,
that.
Okay, so, all right, well, let's move on then.
Better news. Brendon Urie of the musical group Panic at the Disco has announced that he is giving $1 million to the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, GLSEN.
And he announced this live on the Today Show, so it couldn't be stopped.
And he's doing this to help them create gay straight alliance groups, or whatever they're calling the GSAs these days,
yes,
around the country.
Now, if you want to have a GSA in your high school, you can, even if you're in the heart of Alabama or Mississippi or any place, because the ACLU will back you up. And the law is that you have to let students form these groups, federal law.
The federal law is that, and this law was written originally to protect students' religious groups.
Yes.
And the law is that if a school allows any extracurricular groups, they have to allow all extracurricular groups. Now, also,
well, related to this, in Canada, I mean, this is, related to this, a judge dismissed an injunction that sought to put a hold on an Alberta law blocking schools from informing their parents their kids have joined a GSA.
Yeah.
They said it had violated their religious freedom. The judge said there's no evidence that GSAs cause harm, and lots of evidence that they do good, including reduction of sex, he said.
Exactly.
And drug use, and improved school performance, and increased sense of safety, and enhanced well-being. So what's the problem?
Another great ally of LGBT kids for many years has been Cyndi Lauper with her True Colors Fund. And they have announced that they are creating a state index on youth homelessness. So they are going to collect information and make it available online for everybody, so you can assess the situation in your state and find resources and whatever. Thank you, Cyndi.
All right, so we should talk about some coming outs, maybe?
Sure.
Collin Martin, 23 years old, pro soccer player for the in Minnesota.
Minnesota United.
Yes, he's come out as gay, and he turns out to be the only one in a major American sports league male, and he did it on Pride Night.
Now, we've had out football players like Michael Sam, basketball players like Jason Collins, Robbie, what's his name? The soccer player.
Played soccer.
I want to say Robbie Rogers, but I'm not sure that's true.
Right.
Okay. Not dead yet. But nobody currently. They've all retired. Or they've come out after they've retired or whatever. Collin Martin, newly out, is the only one at the moment in any baseball, football, soccer, anything. He's the only one who's out.
And John Davidson has come back. He was the top attorney there at Lambda Legal Defense for many years, and he left, and he's now with Freedom for All Americans. He's got 30 years experience fighting for LGBT rights, and this group is, of course, trying to win non-discrimination protections for us nationwide.
Well, they're doing a number of things. They're doing lawsuits to make sure that things like Title VII and Title IX or sex discrimination laws are interpreted to include sexual orientation and gender identity. They're advocating for new laws like the Equality Act, which would be a national law to inculcate non-discrimination rules across the country in public accommodations, employment, and housing. Mm-hmm. So Freedom for All Americans is the group that is taking on the task now of working for all of us nationally on lawsuits and legislation. And freedomforallamericans.org is where you can go to look up the work they're doing. And the fact that they've hired John is a good indication that they're serious about ramping up their work. And of course, we had a lot of thoughts of Gilbert Baker this past Pride Week, and we just learned that his memoir, Rainbow Warrior, will be published. Not final on the title. I know there's a controversy over the title, but his memoir will be published by the Chicago Review Press next June. As will Peter Staley's memoir. Yes. Peter Staley's a big AIDS activist, fierce one, treatment action group as well. Just want to shout out to Decatur, Illinois, which held its first Pride celebration. Population 72,000. And you want to tell us about Dick Leitch's memorial? I mean, put a couple of pictures up. So we had his funeral, and afterwards they had a reception at at Julius's, where the sip-in was, the first act of LGBT civil disobedience in 1966, where we won the right to be served drinks in a bar. And right in the center of the picture is one of his young friends, Paul Havern, and that's the owner of the bar there, the woman and our friend. But there's put the picture back up. Next to right there within the dark T-shirt is Matt Bomer. And it turns out that in his last months of his life, he went to see the boys in the band and was invited back to talk to the whole cast backstage. And I talked to Matt afterwards, and he said it was an honor to have him, and we're just all grateful for what he did, which was terrific. I will send out a link to Dick Leitch's story on the Stonewall Rebellion. He wrote it I want to read it. He wrote it that night, and I'm going to send it to you. The other picture we have is of all the young friends of Dick Leitch. Do you have that picture? I don't think we have. You don't have that one? No. All right, you don't have that one. But that's a story too. And Paul was one of them, the kid in the middle, because they're all in their 20s, and they sort of adopted Dick and had a wonderful time with him and learned so much from him and loved him. All right, let's move on to international news. Unless you have something else that I think I'm going to go. No, yes, please. Okay. Well, update on the story from last week about the United Kingdom legalizing civil partnerships for heterosexual couples. This has been a crusade of gay activist Peter Tatchell for years. So we have equality for all. We have a picture there of Rebecca Steinfeld and Charles Cadan. And what they said was that, marriage is something grounded in the ownership of women and has a bad history, and we want to be able to have civil partnership too. God, I haven't heard that kind of talk since the 70s. Women were treated as property, they said, and we don't want to be a part of it. We just want to. Now, here in New York, you can have a domestic partnership. You don't have to get married if you're non-gay. In fact, most domestic partnerships are non-gay people. Right. Yeah. In New York. But back in the United Kingdom, the island of Jersey, marriages have finally begun there. They went through their own little struggle to legalize same-sex marriages, and now they began as of July 1st. And also in the United Kingdom, the government has a new LGBT action plan. Now, this is a conservative government, but Peter Tatchell says it fails to end detention and deportation of LGBTQ refugees from homophobic countries or compensate gay and bi men who were convicted under anti-gay laws. He said the budget for it is £4.5 million, which ain't that much these days, is insulting, especially since they're cutting funds for sexual health clinics. But it does
ban conversion therapy.
Okay, I suspect the fight will continue. I'd like to hopscotch the globe with pride celebrations.
Yeah.
Now, Istanbul, Turkey has had major pride celebrations for many, many years. But under the new Trump of Turkey, Mr. Erdogan, the right-wing government has banned and shut down pride celebrations in the last few years on the grounds that there were...
On the grounds that I want to get...
Wait, start again on those pictures.
I want to get reelected. That's the grounds.
Well, on the but his excuse is security concerns. He can't protect people. Well, who is attacking the pride marchers? Oh, I believe it is the police officers in their helmets with their batons, their rubber bullets they were shooting at.
Tear gas.
Tear gas. Dogs. They were using dogs to attack pride marches because pride marchers were not giving up on this.
There they are.
But there they are running away from the cops because of the violent attacks, not of the right wing coming after them, just the right-wing cops and government coming after the pride marchers.
There they are gathering together, and you can see there are thousands of people who managed to come out illegally. This is what I'm saying. They tell us we can't, we have to still do it.
That's right, in defiance of violent attacks from the government and the armed authorities. So congratulations to activists in Turkey. You did a great job, and you will be a model for us.
Manila had a pride march where they braved heavy rain, and they're pushing for marriage equality, which is before the courts there.
Now, I have to say, I did not know that Swaziland in Africa had become eSwatini.
Yes, but
that is the new name of the country.
And they had their first pride.
They certainly did. And there they are, very, very happy to be having their first pride celebration in eSwatini.
And our U.S. ambassador to eSwatini, Lisa Peters, said she was thrilled to see it. Now, this is a country that has the last absolute monarchy in Africa, and the king is not happy.
Well, here's my favorite. This is a statement from a government official about why they criminalize sodomy.
In eSwatini.
In eSwatini. Our statutes criminalize sodomy, but they're silent about consensual sex because sodomy is a crime like rape. Really?
Listen.
500 people showed up at Pride in eSwatini, and
in reading some history, I read a New York judge in the 60s who said it was worse than rape. In the
consensual
60s.
sodomy?
Yes.
People, what is with it? They are panicked. They are panicked.
Relax.
We're
not going to hurt you.
Panama is much more accepting and respectful, and they had a nice pride celebration this past weekend. 'Tis the season. We have a picture of Panama Pride somewhere in there.
Yep.
There it is. Yeah, a big happy crowd in Panama.
On the other hand, in the Ukraine, LGBTQ activist was attacked in Kryvyi Rih. His name is Boris Zlotchenko. He was the lead organizer of the Pride Parade there, but he was set upon by 10 men who severely beat him, and his group said that the police refused to arrive on the scene.
He was hospitalized.
He said the march must go on.
In Angola, back in Africa, the government has given recognition to the LGBT organization Iris Angola Association.
Now, this is a country where the law is silent on homosexual activity.
They've been trying for 5 years to get this recognition. We told you last week about an LGBT organization in Morocco, I think, that had finally achieved government recognition. This is a big deal. Now, in this country, well, I guess we need like 501c3 status. We do need some government sanction. But in these countries, it's more about the government really allowing you to exist.
Well, it wasn't until 1973 in New York that the court would register the group Lambda Legal Defense. It took a Court of Appeals decision, and they had lost the case on the way up.
Dykes on Bikes had a whole long fight with the state to get them to allow the name Dykes on Bikes.
Back to Africa, Mozambique, they've been fighting for 10 years to get their group Lambda registered, and it's still being turned down.
Now,
even though the High Court said, you've got to do this. When are you going to do it? And then in Kenya, the Registrar of Societies acknowledges intersex people for the first time.
Well, I'm a little gobsmacked, as they say, about what's going on in Moscow in the mayor's race in Russia. There's an out gay, HIV-positive man, Anton Krasovsky, a former TV anchor, who is running for mayor of Moscow.
He has to get his signatures first.
Well, the fact that he can walk the streets safely is
amazing.
Yeah.
In Osaka, Japan, they're going to issue documents to recognize same-sex partnerships.
They are the 8th city or territory or prefecture or whatever in Japan to recognize same-sex partnerships. In London, what's the big one of the big hits in the theater at the Young Vic?
Oh, you're talking about The Inheritance?
Fun Home.
Oh, right. That's open now.
Yeah.
Fun Home is a big hit there.
Big hit in London.
Yes.
In Costa Rica, the president has ordered all agencies to routinely change documents for transgender people without putting them through some huge rigmarole, like in the United States, where they can't get their passports renewed.
And Mexico has elected a leftist president. They call him AMLO. He's included people of all sexual preferences in his victory speech.
I'm extremely interested to see how he, an avowed leftist, is going to interact with our president. I suspect he will be quite tough on Mr. Trump.
I hope so.
It'll be interesting to see.
I hope so. Give us another option of some place to go.
Yeah, and at the Miss Universe pageant in Spain, don't forget that Donald Trump used to own the Miss Universe pageant. Angela Ponce has won Miss Universe Spain, and she is a trans woman, and she is going to be going to the International Miss Universe pageant in Philippines as the representative of Spain. Now, in fact, the Donalds stood up for a trans contestant years ago in the Miss Universe pageant.
Mexico City has their first woman mayor. We've never had one in New York. And in Ireland, the out gay prime minister has come out for women priests. He says it's up to the church, but I think they should do it.
What a thought.
All right, AIDS news?
Yes.
Insurance premiums are skyrocketing due to Trump's interference with the ACA, especially for 50 to 65-year-olds. I can attest to that.
He'll blame Obama.
It's all GOP sabotage, or the companies say the rates would be flat.
Yeah, exactly. If you're looking for GMHC, Gay Men's Health Crisis in New York, they are expanding and moving some of their operations to 307 West 38th Street between 8th and 9th, but they'll still be have some stuff going on at their West 29th Street facility.
Now, the White House was bragging on National HIV Testing Day that they had approved generic medications to dramatically reduce infections.
I don't think so.
What kind of a lie is that? It's in there. I mean, the cost of Truvada has gone through the roof, and they've also dramatically cut HIV/AIDS funding. They've cut $1 billion from the Global AIDS Fund. That's a way to extend
and they're going to take
epidemic.
us out of NATO and the World Trade Organization and the Paris Peace Accords and trade deals.
They fired the Presidential Advisory Commission on HIV/AIDS, and they've yet, this was a year ago, and they've yet to appoint new members.
They fired the entire Presidential AIDS Commission.
But a survey of 65% of doctors now say they're willing to prescribe PrEP to adolescents.
I watched a very interesting Vice documentary on YouTube called Latinx Young HIV on the Border. And it's about young HIV-positive Latinx people on the Texas-Mexico border and what they're coping with and what they know and don't know about the epidemic and what their lives are like. And it's a production of Vice. It is on YouTube, and all you have to do is look up Latinx HIV on the Border. Fascinating, moving, and well worth spending a little time looking at.
Those Vice reports scare me.
Well, I'm about to talk about something else on Vice as we get to entertainment news.
Okay.
and it's an update on Pose.
Yeah.
Have you continued to watch it?
A little, it's hard for me to stay with.
It's not your kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't watch series like that,
right.
Dramatic series. I've continued to watch it because we both watched the first episode and thought, well, maybe it has potential. This is not grabbing us off the top.
Giving a lot of work to transgender actors.
Oh, yeah.
And that's good.
One of whom is actually coming to New York to campaign for Melissa Sklar's in Queens.
Transgender friend of ours who is a longtime political activist who's running for an assembly seat.
From Queens. But I think Pose is improving as it goes along. I'm getting drawn into the characters as I suspected I would. A viewer wrote us this week saying, please give it another chance. Well, I've been giving it a chance, and I have been liking it as I went along. But it is a dramatized look at the ballroom scene and the people involved.
Presided over by Tony Award-winning Billy Porter.
He is fantastic on the show. He is really good.
The category is?
Live, love, pose, I think. Another viewer said, I know you're talking about Pose, that's great, but I can't believe you're not talking about My House, which is a reality show about the ballroom scene on Vice. Oh. So, being the dutiful person I am.
You are dedicated.
Well, someone points me to a TV show, that's a pretty easy grab. So I went to On Demand, and sure enough, 10 half-hour episodes. Actually, they were each a little shorter than half an hour. So it was pretty easy to, over a period of a few days, watch the whole series. And it is the real people in the ballroom scene in New York, in Philadelphia, and Chicago. You get to know the characters as you go along at first.
Anybody left from Paris is Burning? That was the original documentary, and that director is the consultant to Pose.
Jenny Livingston. But seeing both the dramatized version in Pose and the real version in My House is a nice balance.
Which is better?
I think they each have something to offer. Pose, the characters are a little more developed because they can script them, but there is no substitute for reality. So getting to see the real people who are doing this is a nice insight, a privilege to watch this. And so My House, you can catch up with on demand on Vice, and Pose continues to run on FX.
Well, we've also been advised by a viewer that we should be checking out Hannah Gadsby, Nanette, on Netflix now.
I did.
I admit I don't have Netflix, but I need to get a smart TV. What kind of a television host am I?
Well, I have a friend's password to Netflix.
She's an Australian comic who is lesbian. How was the show, Anne?
Well, again, if you viewers tell me something to watch, the chances are I might watch it. So I watched Nanette with Hannah Gadsby, and it's an hour and 10 minutes. It's a stand-up comedy special. And at first, I was not taken by this. She's a lesbian comedian, very gentle to begin with, very sort of soft humor. And I thought, really? What's all the excitement about with this? This is not really my style. I'm not so taken with this. But the last half hour, boom, it just explodes in power. She starts talking about how comedy is really not the right venue to tell the truth of her life and deal with the issues that need to be dealt with. And the power dynamics between men and women, rape, just the way the world works. And she talks about giving up comedy. I've since read that she may not be so firm on that because this has been such a hit that she's now seen maybe I can talk about real issues that I didn't think I could for a while. But I was really blown away by the last half hour of this special, and at first I didn't think, how can I recommend this? It's not that good.
I'm going to get Netflix. I did watch her on, you can watch her on YouTube. Her name is Hannah Gadsby.
But I watched that. You sent me the 3-minute clip. It was nothing. I mean, everything that's in that clip is in the special, but it's not the power part. and it's not a good representation of the real value of Nanette. So thank you to the viewer who recommended that, and I will now recommend Nanette on Netflix.
And I want you to get your calendars out. There's a bunch of shows coming. Coming in October off-Broadway, Gloria, a life about Gloria Steinem, played by Christine Lottie.
Lottie.
Lottie? All right. Well, let's call her.
She and I were in Smoke Enders together.
Oh. After...
40 years ago.
Now, Act 1 is by Emily Mann, and Act 2 will be a talking circle with the audience about the themes of the play. I think that I could go for that, and Gloria's on board.
Okay.
The Devil Wears Prada is in development as a musical with a book by Paul Rudnick, the out gay, and music by out gay Elton John, and Shayna Taub is going to be the lyricist.
All right.
What else? Congratulations to Dustin Lance Black and Tom Daly. They had a baby boy at the end of June. Here's another Robbie Ray Black Daly. All they showed you online was pictures of the baby's feet.
We had Gail Friedman on here talking about her documentary Hot to Trot about same-sex ballroom dancing a while ago. It won the audience favorite award at last year's Outfest LGBT Film Festival last fall here in New York. Newfest. Outfest is LA. Newfest is New York. Thank you. Well, the film is now going to open theatrically at the Quad Cinema in August. We'll remind you when we get closer. Not yet, but you assume these things will build. But you can catch Hot to Trot at the Quad in August. We'll give you more details when we get there.
And the Whitney Museum, starting July 13th and through September 30th, is going to have an exhibit called David Wojnarowicz, History Keeps Me Awake at Night. There's a picture of David. He was a fierce poet, activist, and artist, of course.
Great guy.
He died in 1992 at the age of 38. He was HIV positive, and we knew him and honor his work and his life.
What a loss.
Fierce stuff. He was the guy who called Cardinal O'Connor a fat cannibal in a black skirt and got into a lot of trouble for his lack of civility. Met with him. He wanted the whole record on Cardinal O'Connor. I said, that is not even the least of it with Cardinal O'Connor.
General Hospital, the daytime soap opera, has added a trans woman, Cassandra James, to the cast as a trans woman. This is, of course, until Pose, not common usage. Now, in 2015, The Bold and the Beautiful had a trans man on the show, but this is new for General Hospital. And I have to celebrate the return of really one of my all-time favorite shows, Claws.
Oh, yeah.
Remember how I was orgasmic about this last year, and it has come back in season 2. Please catch up on this show. Watch the first season on demand. Watch it now. This is Niecy Nash running a nail salon and opioid distribution and money laundering business with the Russian mob in Florida. How can you resist that? So part of her little gang of manicurists is a lesbian known as Anne, who was the focus of this week's episode, as she had to spend time with her family, from whom she is estranged, her gay brother, closeted politician in Florida. They're all Cuban exiles. And they have dinner with their parents, who have rejected her as an out lesbian. I'm conflicted as to whether to give this away, but it's so, because it's a delicious reveal on the show. But
Spoiler alert!
Anne gets so upset with the parents at dinner because they're being their usual obnoxious selves. And she finally says, I'm not having anything more to do with this nonsense. There's too much lying there. I can't stand it anymore. He's gay, she says, pointing to her brother, who has supposedly been closeted. And the parents sit there and say, we don't give a shit. We're gay, too.
You just said a bad word. They're going to have to bleep.
Sorry, it was on Claws, and now they'll have to bleep it here. they're gay too, the parents.
That's great.
It went on and
Since
on.
I just finished writing Dick Leitch's obituary and a story about his young friends, which will be in the Gay City News, and I will send you a link to that. But I read about his coming out story.
Okay.
So he's 18 years old, and he goes to a gay bar in Louisville, Kentucky, and he says, I was picked up by some old queen. He said it was pretty horrible, but I wanted to have sex, and I did it, and I acted like I was sophisticated, and the guy sends me flowers and a card the next day declaring his love. My mother intercepted the flowers. She said, are you a homosexual? Now this is 1953, folks. And he says, yes. He doesn't hide it. Well, apparently, Dick's cousin was a priest who alerted the parents, I think the boy is gay. And they read up on it, so they were a little prepared. But they said, well, do you want to see somebody? He says, well, I'll see a doctor, because he thought homosexuality was a sickness, and he kept waiting for his face to break out. Now, this is how ignorant people were, because you couldn't talk about these issues. So they go to the psychiatrist, who first of all lights into the parents, you did this to him, seriously. And then they say, and it's going to take you a bunch of years, but I can cure you. And the mother just says, how dare you ruin this boy's life and talk to us this way, blaming me? Come on, Dick, we're leaving. And that was it. I mean, it's just an unbelievable coming out story.
Well, it reminds me, 50s, I have a friend who's making a documentary about a gay composer here and his topsy-turvy life. But one chapter of it is that he was at Yale in the 50s, and they were doing gay witch hunts. Larry Kramer was there at the same time.
Going to psychiatrists
and
at the behest of his brother.
Both of them in this film talk about being dragged into the administration and being accused of being gay, ordered to reveal the names of other people who were gay, and being forced to go to therapy.
Unbelievable. And that's in our lifetimes, folks. I was born in 1953.
But what strikes me about this also is that these conversations, this life, all existed long before Stonewall or anything else. And I think sometimes people think that this all sprang full-blown in 1969 out of nowhere.
No, when Dick started in at Mattachine Society, the pre-Stonewall group, I mean, the people who went to the meetings really wanted to be told by the psychiatrist that they were sick. And he couldn't stand that, and he stood up to them and tried to move it along into a more activist bent. Thank you, Dick.
Well, I was just remembering the other day that in my own coming out and my fear and my ignorance and everything, what switched it all for me was being taken to a lesbian bar and walking in the door and saying, oh my God, there's so many people and they're all so different. This must not be an illness.
Well, what switched it for me was making love, because, I was not going to be denied that after that. That was great.
On that note, we end. We'll see you next week. Thank you, and stay cool.